Hello, boys and girls. So this is going to be first of many series of videos we're going to be doing while we're on, I guess, break. Not break, but while we're away from school. So Tuesday, we did a lesson on relationships between events. And we talked about in reading, when we read certain material, sometimes the information is put in chronological order or sequential order. So in this passage about making mummies, it talks about the mummification process. And you'll notice in some of the paragraphs here, they use time order words like first, next, then, after, and finally. When you see keywords like that, you're reading a text that's writing events or a process in time order or sequential order. So we need to be aware of that. And in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how to look for those keywords and how you can use those to answer questions about the text. So let's jump ahead and let's look at the 1904 World's Fair. And as we read this text, you'll notice that it's written in some kind of sequential order. In the text on the side is a reading guide. You want to pay attention to that. These are like tips. How does the author compare the present to the past? What details does the author include to illustrate life in 1904? What is the main idea of paragraph 3? And what are some inventions that are no longer used today? So when they give you this guide, as you read, you want to look for those clues. And that's what you want to highlight or underline when you read. So let's do this together. And then for those of you that weren't on Tuesday, you have questions that you had to do on page 87 and 89. Actually, that's for Monday. I'm sorry, for Monday. So the 1904 World's Fair. Many people can't imagine summertime without eating a cone filled with ice cream. But before 1904, few people had ever even heard of the ice cream cone. Then the St. Louis World's Fair opened, and people sampled this new treat. So that's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. The ice cream cone wasn't the only treat people enjoyed at the 1904 World's Fair. Besides the ice cream cone, several foods became popular after the fair. People bought fairy floss or cotton candy by the box. They ate hot dogs and hamburgers. They drank iced tea and Dr. Pepper. And people tried a new breakfast food for the very first time, puffed rice. This is paragraph 3 coming up. And notice the time word in 1904. So I know on the second checkbox here, it says, what details does the author include to illustrate life in 1904? So in 1904, electricity was not commonly used. Very few people had it in their homes. The fair was a way to show the importance of electricity. People saw buildings lit up inside and out by electricity. They saw machines that used electricity, such as the typewriter, dishwasher, and coffee pot. Rides, such as the Ferris wheel, were operated by electricity. Electricity was used to add colorful lights to water displays. Okay, paragraph 4. Automobiles were another invention that drew huge crowds. At the time, horseless vehicles were mainly used for public transportation or to transport goods. Few people had their own cars. At the fair, France and the United States showed off 160 automobiles that ran on steam, electricity, or gas. Some automobiles could go as fast as 40 miles per hour. And that was pretty fast back then. And paragraph 5, about 20 million people visited the St. Louis World's Fair in the 7 months it was open. Many of the inventions they saw and foods they ate are part of our everyday lives today. But for the people living in 1904, the inventions were amazing and exciting. So if we go back to our guide here, find the clues that talk about how does the author compare the present to the past. What details does the author include to illustrate life in 1904? What is the main idea of paragraph 3? What are some inventions that are no longer used today? So I would stop the video at this point, go back and underline, and then after you do that, click on play again and see how you did. Okay, so we're back now. So let's go back to the reading guide. How does the author compare the present to the past? So let me go back here. So I looked through the text. And what I noticed is that the author talks about common things that were introduced at the World's Fair that we're familiar with today. For example, it talks about cotton candy, hot dogs, hamburgers, iced tea, Dr. Pepper, and people tried a new breakfast food for the very first time, puffed rice. And it even talked about how before 1904, very few people had even heard of the ice cream cone. This was one of the new inventions of the time. Okay, we look back here and we look at what details does the author include to illustrate life in 1904. Well, if we go to paragraph 3, it talks about how electricity wasn't commonly used. Very few people had it in their homes. Today, electricity is very much part of our lives, but back then, it was just starting to become more popular. And it talked about some of the inventions that were common back then that we still use today. Now we look at the main idea of paragraph 3. Well, right here, electricity was not commonly used. Very few people had it in their homes. The fair was a way to show the importance of electricity. And then it talked about how it was used. They saw machines that used electricity, such as the typewriter, the dishwasher, and coffee pot. Rides, such as the Ferris wheel, were operated by electricity. So it talked about how electricity could be useful. And then what are some inventions that are no longer used today? So if we look here, talked about the steam automobiles that use steam, which is not something that is an invention that's really used today. Even the typewriter, even though it still exists, it's not very common. Now we have computers and word processors. So as you read, pay attention to the events and details that really illustrate the main ideas. And when you answer the questions, I believe you're going to answer questions on pages 87, 89. Make sure that you highlight the important information and preview the questions. Okay, bye-bye now.